So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this, the second presentation in our primary and community care implementation series. Today's session is about leveraging sustainable occupational therapy for climate mitigation and adaptation. My name is Jessica Nowlin, and I'm an innovation lead with Cascades. I'd like to begin with a moment to acknowledge and reflect on the lands from which we're all joining this virtual gathering today. Our event brings together individuals living and working on many different lands, which are the traditional territories of many different First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. I myself am joining today from Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. And if you're unsure, I'd encourage you to learn about the people who are the traditional caretakers of the land where you are now. We'd also want to reflect on the ways in which healthcare has not always been equitable or inclusive of Indigenous peoples and their ways of healing and knowing, and acknowledge that environmental healing begins with reconciliation and recognition of the damage that colonialism has inflicted on the planet. A couple of slides here on Cascades for those who may not be familiar with us. Cascades, which stands for Creating a Sustainable Canadian Health System in a Climate Crisis, is funded for a 5-year period by Environment and Climate Change Canada's Climate Action and Awareness Fund. Cascades is an initiative of 4 founding partners: the University of Toronto Collaborative Centre for Climate Health and Sustainable Care, the Healthy Populations Institute at Dalhousie University, the Planetary Healthcare Lab at the University of British Columbia, and the Canadian Coalition for Green Healthcare. And in Quebec, we are also partnered with the Réseau d'Action pour la Santé Durable du Québec. Cascade's mission is to strengthen the healthcare community's capacity to transition towards high quality, low carbon, sustainable, and climate resilient care across Canada. We've identified 10 priority action areas where there's clear evidence and experience to justify decisive movement forward. And this includes shifts in care pathways like primary and community care, as well as critical enablers of system change. And our work happens through sort of 3 main pillars of activity. The first is to create resources to fill the implementation gap, such as the one that you'll be learning about today, and working with teams of experts who are testing those innovations in their practice settings. We offer training to strengthen capacity through our courses and events like this. And then we also work to support pan-Canadian networks for knowledge translation, exchange, and coordination. Janet Craik holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Occupational Therapy from Queen's University and a Master's degree in Rehabilitation Science from the University of Toronto. Her involvement as an occupational therapist includes many years as a frontline practitioner, manager, author, educator, and former executive director for the Canadian Association of Occupational Therapists. She's deeply interested in exploring how to improve health systems in Canada to be more sustainable. And Nancy Rushford is a registered occupational therapist and psychotherapist and an assistant clinical professor at McMaster University. She holds a Master of Science degree in Occupational Therapy from McMaster University, a Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology from the Adler School of Professional Psychology, and a PhD from the University of Sydney in Australia. Nancy has additional certification in equine-assisted psychotherapy and is a biomimicry practitioner. She's the co-founder of Connect by Nature, a community-based organization that offers nature and equine-assisted occupational therapy, psychotherapy, and social-emotional learning services to children and youth in the Niagara region. So thank you both so much for being here today. We're looking forward to your presentations so much. Just a reminder to people to please feel free to put your questions into the chat throughout these presentations, and we will make sure that we get to them during question and answer period. Thank you, and take it away.
All right, thank you, Jessica. Is my slide up on screen? Excellent. Okay, well, welcome everyone, and really thank you for being here today for this very important topic. My name is Janet Craik. As Jessica said, I'm an occupational therapist. I'm the rehabilitation lead at Cascades, and I had the privilege of being the lead author on the Sustainable Occupational Therapy Playbook. So today we're talking about leveraging sustainable occupational therapy for climate mitigation and adaptation. It's a very big topic, so where to begin? I think we're going to start at the beginning. So my colleague Nancy and I are going to take you on a bit of a journey in the next little while. We want to explore the connection between human occupation and climate change the connection between climate change and health systems, and then discuss occupational therapy's contribution in climate mitigation, that is reducing the emissions that cause climate change, as well as our contributions to climate adaptation. Those are the actions that we're using to manage the risks of climate change. We'll be offering up some pages from the Sustainable Occupational Therapy Playbook, but we can't go through the whole playbook. But what we hope to do today is give you a brief introduction into the playbook as a guide and as a set of resources for you to explore to then create your own personalized playbook or action plan for more sustainable climate resistant occupational therapy. And as Jessica said, there'll be time for discussion. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Nancy, or actually to Kate. Maybe we can start with the video, right?
So I'm going to carry on from here, and first just want to thank Janet for inviting me to participate in both as a committee member on the sustainability playbook, but also for this webinar and presentation. And so to begin, that short video clip, The Earth Story, reveals how in a very brief amount of time that we've been on this planet, our patterns of occupation, so those activities of daily living, have been unsustainable to the point where we have compromised the health of the planet and the ecosystems upon which we depend. And so these patterns of occupation have driven climate change, which in turn is negatively impacting upon human health and well-being and the health of the planet. Can you go to the next slide, Janet? Yeah. So the thing is, as occupational therapists, we know that human occupation is also a vehicle to promote sustainable health and well-being for people, but also for the planet. The problem is we've forgotten on a global scale the planet part, that Earth's context, including its limits and boundaries. And if we are to achieve optimal health outcomes for people within the context of healthcare and health systems, through, for example, the WHO's One Health strategy, then we also need a way to restore our connection with nature within health systems. And we need to do that not only to protect the ecosystems, our life support systems, and so that we can continue to receive and experience nature's health benefits, but also so that we can begin to learn from nature's intelligence how to be climate resilient and how to live sustainably, both in our practice and in everyday life. And this respect for and appreciation for nature's intelligence is deeply rooted in Indigenous cultures from around the world.
So I think it's well known that, climate change is the greatest global threat facing the world in the 21st century today. But as the Lancet says, it's also the greatest opportunity to redefine the social and environmental determinants of health. The discourse is primarily focused around climate change, but like changes in typical weather patterns, but we're really dealing with a number of ecological crises right now: loss of habitat, ocean acidification, and so on. These ecological stressors, they impact the social and the structural systems, which are life supports. We need these intact systems to support our health and well-being. The diagram that's up on the screen here just shows how this is a dynamic system, and how ecological stresses, how it can impact our social structural determinants of health, and how we can result in poor health outcomes. And then that turns on increasing demand on the health systems, as well as putting stress on the health system. So it's quite a complex system. But the evidence is clear that climate change is claiming lives and livelihoods worldwide today. But what this image doesn't show, what is great interest to occupational therapy, is how climate change impacts occupational performance and participation. So this is a screen grab from the playbook, and it's just really challenging OTs to think in occupational terms what forms of occupational disruption and dysfunction can happen in climate change. And as occupational therapists, we can't ignore the bidirectional relationship between human occupation and climate change that Nancy has brought forward. And as well, we cannot ignore the disproportionate impact that climate change has on equity deserving groups. But what we can do is as occupational therapists, we can help promote sustainable occupation. This is using Rayworth's donut model to help assess the occupational form. So when we talk about occupational form, it's like what tools and resources, what methods are used in order to perform occupations. We can use this to create that sustainability lens to assess the occupational form from a sustainable point of view. The image on the screen, it shows the case of laundry, where we can examine the potential social shortfall as well as the potential ecological overshoot of each occupational form. This analysis may help us, balance activities of daily living within the limitations of the planet and the social structures we have. So occupational therapists' contribution to sustainable health systems are many. Prevention is widely recognized to be the most effective means of ensuring healthcare sustainability. And as occupational therapy can prevent downstream carbon-intensive care, we have a high sustainable value proposition to offer into health systems. If we think of the carbon footprint of one day in hospitals, 5 times that of a household. We also, on the screen here, we can think of the economic terms of cost of home care versus long-term care versus inpatient care. Any ounce of prevention is definitely worth a pound of cure, and occupational therapy is it's well evidenced that we can prevent this downstream care.
So yeah, there are 5 key tools for change when it comes to sustainable practice within health systems and within a healthcare context. And they are prevent, reduce, redesign, renew, and adapt. And we'll speak to each one of these as action areas within occupational therapy. So renew. So to renew means to put nature and the climate back into our thinking and begin to learn ways to integrate nature into our practice as therapists and within the healthcare system. And this is captured by the concept of biophilic health, which is a way to describe a state of well-being where people exist and thrive in relationship with nature, the earth, and other species. And it's also an approach to promoting health and well-being that restores a deep connection between people and nature. And this concept of biophilic health embraces 2 things. One, that connecting with nature helps us to learn how to create healthier, more sustainable ways of living in the world. And the second is that when we connect with nature, it is nature that helps us to renew and restore our own personal health and well-being. Go ahead,
Right.
Janet.
So this is another page taken from the playbook, and it talks about 10 action points of what occupational therapy can offer for being more sustainable. And as Nancy has presented, the first and foremost is always preventing health service use. So if we can understand and promote the role of occupational therapy in preventing the need for downstream health service, we know health promotion, injury prevention, mental health service provision, any of these services that reduces downstream expenditures, such as minimizing visits to the emergency room, minimizing hospitalization, minimizing pharmacological and surgical interventions, will have a lower carbon input. We can also consider using an anti-oppressive lens when designing and implementing our services. Sustainability is about inequity, poverty, and injustice, as vulnerable and disenfranchised people are most exposed to climate disasters. So sustainability is just as much about addressing the inequities and strengthening the determinants of good health by, improving access to healthcare or housing quality. A third action we can do is build individual, community, and population resilience. The health impacts of climate change will be determined mainly by the vulnerability of populations and their resilience to the current rate of climate change and the extent and the pace of adaptation. So, occupational therapy can play a great role here in increasing community resilience by promoting local assets. For example, connecting people to transit and community spaces. Or we can work with community partners to build resilience and promote sustainable occupational performance and participation, such as maximizing inclusion in and playgrounds. So the first thing we can do is really apply our services to prevent downstream care. Then when our services are needed, we can look at reducing the impact of resource use in our service provision. And there's a lot that the playbook offers as far as guidance for sustainable operations. And then we get into the fun stuff, designing and creating environmentally informed practices and adapting practices, of which I'm going to pass it back to Nancy, who has firsthand experience with both of these in her clinical work.
Thank you, Janet. So, when we're talking about redesigning and creating environmentally informed practice, that really translates into designing our interventions or strategies with nature and the climate in mind. And there are three essential elements of this. One that we've already talked about is the importance of connecting people with nature. And two, it's learning to use biophilic design, which is about bringing nature into built environments for the health benefits. And the third is something called biomimicry. So, learning to practice biomimicry. And these three elements, they underpin a biophilic health approach, and they are based on the premise that humans possess an innate tendency to seek connections with nature and other living things. And this is called the biophilia hypothesis. It was a term thought to be coined by the psychologist Eric Fromm, and then later popularized by E.O. Wilson, who is a biologist. Biomimicry then looks deeper into that connection with nature beyond its health benefits to seek to learn from and mimic the strategies found in nature to create more sustainable solutions to human challenges, including health challenges. Go ahead. So in a minute, less than a minute, I've got a short video about biomimicry. That will do a better job than me of really illustrating what biomimicry is and perhaps inspiring you to look farther to see how this may be something that you could incorporate into your practice and within healthcare systems. But first, a little bit more about biophilic design. So biophilic design, as I had mentioned, seeks to bring nature into the built environment. And I want to encourage you to check out the website that is listed at the bottom. So it's the Terrapin Green Company, and they do a phenomenal job of outlining principles and patterns that helps designers, so including occupational therapists, to look at how you can look at both the nature of the space and nature in the space that responds to our innate biophilic need to connect with nature and also to bring nature's health benefits inside. So whether that's things like adapting the space by being able to have a visual connection to nature within an indoor space, whether it is changing the air quality and variability, using different forms of lighting, how you connect different patterns of nature and bring those abstract patterns represented into the indoor space. And this is its own design practice that certainly OTs can explore and perhaps partner with designers to influence the health and well-being of their clients and to look at health systems as well. So let's move on from biophilic design. So that's kind of the first connection piece. So bringing nature's health benefits inside, and then biomimicry, going deeper into how can we really look through this connection with nature at nature's intelligence and how that can help us to solve some of our problems within health systems and within our practice and to help people and promote optimal health outcomes. So let's go ahead with this video. It's a long film. I'd encourage you to have a look, but we're only going to play 2 minutes and 6 seconds. There are many examples of biomimicry solutions, specifically within healthcare. I've listed a few of them there that are worth having a look at. Things like painless microneedles inspired by mosquito bites, lotus-inspired self-cleaning surfaces, medical adhesives that mimic a gecko's feet. But there are also ways that we can use biomimicry to develop solutions or strategies within the context of our practice and with healthcare systems that aren't necessarily technological, that help us to help people and to develop our practices so that we become and we help people become better adapted to life's context, the earth context right now, which is the climate crisis, as well as helping people on an individual level develop their own adaptive capacity to respond to stressful life events. So that brings me to two practice illustrations that Janet had asked me to give a couple of illustrations or scenarios from my practice. And I have two of them, one that relates to my recent practice as a therapist working in nature-assisted therapy, primarily with children and youth. And the other involves some experiences in disaster response and recovery as an OT. And I have wanted to actually share the first one as a story. I think it best describes it. So it will take 2 minutes. Do you think we have the 2 minutes for the story? Yeah, roughly 2 minutes. Okay. So this is a story about a boy and a caterpillar, and it's a true story that's happened recently within the last year. And I'm sorry, you're going to hear my dogs barking and the bird with this story. So it's a story about learning from and healing through nature in ways that develop adaptive capacity and resilience. And it's one that holds promise for learning new and healthy and more sustainable ways of living in the world that reflect a solidarity with all forms of life. And inherent in this story is nature's life lessons, so nature's intelligence, that are expressed through the relationship between the boy and the caterpillar in their parallel behaviors and strategies that show these connections between nature's intelligent functioning and human functioning. So, Janet, are you okay if I go ahead with the story? I should have given it to you in advance with the background noise, but we'll push on, okay? Does that sound all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So a young boy walks through the forest. The leaves are just starting to turn color and it's quiet. The boy is on guard for danger. He has a history of trauma, so he's startled easily and is afraid to explore new places or try new things. He stumbles upon a caterpillar. The caterpillar scares him, and he scares the caterpillar. The boy instinctively runs to hide behind the tree as the caterpillar curls up to protect itself. They are both afraid and need to find stable ground. The caterpillar is still and looks a bit like a twig. Then it starts to wiggle, using its fuzzy body and tiny antenna to sense its new spot on the red leaf. The caterpillar has learned to smell danger. Suddenly it curls up. Danger! The boy decides the leaf isn't good enough for the caterpillar. A bird might see and eat it. He pauses and wonders if there might be other ways to make the caterpillar a home. Together, the boy and the therapist search for things in the forest that would make a good habitat. A bird, hearing the sounds of their footsteps, calls out nearby. They walk onward toward the sound of a stream. There they find a bigger leaf, along with twigs and moss that can form soft ground and flexible edges. The therapist places the caterpillar on the leaf, and the boy moves even closer to watch. He wants the caterpillar to be put in the best spot near the tree in case it needs to climb to escape. So together, the boy and the therapist try different positions, moving the caterpillar from one spot to the next on its leaf until it looks and feels just right. The boy steps away from the caterpillar, who is curled up on the moss beneath the tree. He waits patiently in the shadows behind the tree. And as he peers around the tree, the caterpillar slowly begins to uncurl and stretch up. The caterpillar climbs with his gut first, and the rest of his body follows, moving like a wave in a stadium. The boy notices how the sunlight makes his body shimmer as he climbs. He has tiny hooks on his feet to help him to climb. Maybe the caterpillar is looking for its place in a caterpillar cluster way up high. The boy climbs up the tree to get a better look. This is something he has never dared to do before. He finds a place on the tree's trunk between two branches and looks down at the little caterpillar. He can feel a gentle, cool breeze on his face as the leaves rustle. The boy watches in amazement as the caterpillar moves inch by inch higher and higher toward a branch with yummy leaves to eat. So that story about this little boy who I was working with in practice really, to me, it really struck me. And I have numerous stories like this one from practice. And I do have the privilege of being able to practice outside in the forest. But an important thing about this story is that there are aspects of that a therapist who's working indoors can bring inside to facilitate nature connection. You can bring in change the air quality. You can bring in some of the natural materials. There are lots of learning opportunities and opportunities to draw upon nature metaphorically, even as a source of courage and inspiration. So I wanted to share that just to stimulate some thinking about, in practice, how it's possible, no matter where you are and what your context is, to try to facilitate these connections to nature that will help build resilience and adaptive capacity, not only in children and adolescents, but across the lifespan. The second example, which is not as lengthy, certainly relates to climate resilience. And this reflects my practice. Many years ago, I worked as an occupational therapist for a disability and development organization called Handicap International. And my role, this was following the Indian Ocean tsunami, and that's really what catalyzed a lot of my work into the area of disaster, and then here to where we are now in terms of facilitating nature connections and nature assisted practice and that sort of thing. And in this role, it was twofold. One, I was managing a local team, not of occupational therapists, it was social workers and physiotherapists who were going out into the community about 2 months post-disaster to try to identify people who had disabilities and provide services to them. And the second aspect of it, which was a real strong development focus, was to try to include people with disabilities in the development agenda. So when Janet was talking about having an anti-oppressive lens and looking at the specific needs of people with disabilities, typically people with disabilities are excluded from the mainstream services. And in fact, a lot of times the assumption is made that, well, there aren't really people with disabilities after a disaster because they haven't been able to survive. So there were people with new disabilities and health conditions following the disaster, but there were also people who had survived who had disabilities. And so much of that role was trying to look at how, moving forward beyond disaster, we can build their resilience and adaptive capacity by integrating their needs into the ordinary development actors, those big organizations, you know, the WHO, UNICEF, all of that, Save the Children, who then start thinking about more marginalized or vulnerable groups and how they can flex their actual programs of disaster recovery and development to include these groups. So in both of those examples, the underlying theme related to occupational therapy and sustainable occupational therapy is this notion of resilience and adaptive capacity, and the value of the profession in being able to help to build resilience. So that's that ability to anticipate, respond to, cope with, recover from, and adapt to shocks and stressors, whether that's on an individual level, like the boy and the caterpillar, or whether that's on a more systems level in terms of, say, for example, working in an international development context. But certainly, if we go to the next slide, when it comes to occupational therapists, so if you're a Canadian occupational therapist working within the health system, I mean, increasingly we are going to be faced with the rising incidence of natural disasters right in our backyards. For example, the wildfires, that are happening right now out west. And so this is not something that is just, and I shouldn't say just us, it's not something that we can ignore. because it's happening in other parts of the world, and it's happening to the most marginalized people first. It is happening to everybody, and will continue to. So there are strategies that we can put in place in the context of health systems that are preventative and that help build that adaptive capacity. And this is I'm trying to remember the name of the website. I think it's referenced there. So as an OT, when you're working with clients, there's a number of resources that are available so that you can look even at simple home modifications and look at what specific needs of the people you are working with that might make them more vulnerable in a situation of, say, a wildfire or a flood. And then how can you help them in the context of their home and their community to be more resilient and to be able to survive and thrive in life as they should with just like anybody else. Do you have the name of it, Janet?
It's the Intact Center for Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo.
Yeah, it's fantastic, these guides. Mm-hmm. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Nancy, for sharing, firsthand clinical stories. And so Nancy and I have gone through kind of the what to do. Up on the screen is some suggestions about how to get there. So 6 action domains that would help to facilitate you to take on these activities to make more sustainable climate resilient occupational therapy. And those actions being educate, collaborate, advocate, quality improvement, incentives, and leadership and governance. And I'm not going to go into details there because where we want to do is we want to leave some time for discussion. And I always like to leave people with some homework or some parting thoughts. So the playbook it provides some strategies, guidance, resources, but it really comes down to your personalized playbook. So how can you actively participate in climate action across the various fronts, be it to minimize healthcare service demand, to lessen the resource use of the services you offer, to integrate eco-friendly or nature-inspired practices, and or to prepare for climate related challenges. And then what specific approaches might you employ? So such as the education, the collaboration, the advocacy, and so on. So I'll leave that with you. And Jessica, I think we want to open it up now, right, to any questions or comments. And I did put my email on the bottom of the screen there. If anyone has anything after this webinar, by all means, I'm happy to take comments.
Great. Thank you so much, Janet and Nancy, for that great presentation and for providing us with some really practical examples of how this could play out in your clinical practice, and also the bigger picture of thinking about, how this sort of fits into the larger health system. So thank you so much for that. I just wanted to mention as well that I think we do have some members of the working group who helped put together the Sustainable Occupational Therapy Playbook, who are on the call today. So just, thank you to those people for their time and contributions. And also an invitation to them to please feel free to add any comments as well if you would like to. I had a question, if I could take the moderator's prerogative here. And I'm just wondering your thoughts on, for people who are maybe not OTs or not working in sort of rehabilitative care professions, do you have any thoughts or advice on how to be integrating the OT kind of model of care into their patient or their client's journey?
Okay, Jessica. Nancy, do you want to tackle that, or you want me to give it a go?
Oh, you're muted, Nancy.
So I said, go ahead, Janet, first, and I'll add on.
Yeah. Well, I think the playbook was really drawn on the principles of sustainable healthcare practice, and I think more and more, if we can highlight the prevention, so take on a health promotion, forefront public health initiatives. If we're going to make the healthcare system better, like if climate change gives us one opportunity, as the Lancet would say, it's the greatest opportunity to address social and environmental determinants of health. I think that falls into the public health sphere. If we can forefront that public health promotion universally, that will make the systems more sustainable, help it build more sustainable systems for sure. I see the hands popping up.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I see we'll go maybe with Samantha first, and we can invite you to unmute.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think I'm a graduate student at Ottawa U, and I do work in the area of kind of disaster risk reduction, and I'm an OT as well. And I think one of my own personal reflections as I've moved through graduate school is that maybe we as OTs don't necessarily see ourselves as being readily involved in, quote unquote, the fight against climate change. And so I think one of the things I was wondering is, what do you think are some of the things that we can do maybe to like foster more of a role for OTs as like a valuable stakeholder in this type of work?
That's great, Samantha. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, if we could be in the headspace. But I think to me, the opportunity to advocate and promote the sustainable value proposition that occupational therapy brings to health systems is quite something. I was at a meeting with the Royal College of Family Physicians, and they're very, very interested, and they're putting a lot of strategy and resources towards planetary health. But I said, physicians can, think about sustainable operations, but if they don't think system transformation and bringing in the wealth of health human resources that we have within Canada into the forefront of our healthcare systems, I think that's the lost opportunity. So then the opportunity for OT is really to advocate for our services and to promote the sustainable value of OT, preventing hospitalizations, preventing people from visiting the ER, keeping people within their community. Nancy, I don't know if you have anything to add, or Samantha?
Yeah, I think it's also remembering as OTs our skill set in that is, we have a very functional problem solution focused kind of approach where we are able to look at the person, the environment, and the occupation and the fit between those. And so we're in a unique position to be able to look at this broader context and look at ways that we can have a better fit within systems and within practice, certainly around that concept of, building adaptive capacity, prevention, resilience. Right?
Anyways, thanks, Samantha. And then I know there's other working group members on the call. Feel free to jump in as well.
I see that Aruna has their hand up, so we can unmute you and you can go ahead.
Hi, Janet. Nice to
Hi.
see you. I just wanted to compliment you all on the excellent work. I was really thrilled to happen upon this playbook. So I think it one of the things that we can each be doing is to share and promote it, because I think it's beautiful, first of all, and I think it has some really challenging concepts, call to action for the profession that I think it's about time. So I really acknowledge that the working group for doing that. So I'm in Toronto, and I currently work in the home care space, and as a director of patient services. And one of the things that I think we could be doing as a profession, from an advocacy point of view, is advocating for the accessibility of living environments, so that people don't necessarily have no option but to go into long-term care. We see that every single day. And I certainly watch as the number of people that are in hospital, that are in the emergency waiting to get into the hospital, that are admitted, but there's no bed for them, the number of people that are alternate level of care. And really the only option for a lot of those people that's really actually actively explored is long-term care. which in and of itself probably has a huge climate impact, and given the size of some of those places. And people generally don't want to go to long-term care. In fact, I venture to say that people do not want to go to long-term care. But we really don't explore the options of building accessible environments. There's lots of building going on around me, but it's all, stories high or narrow townhouses, where the option for people to go home is a physical barrier of the built environment. And I just don't see anybody really commenting on that and providing a challenge to the building community or the politicians around how something like that could really influence how the health system works, and would also have a positive impact on the broader sustainability and climate space. So that's something that I've been really thinking a lot about, and it's really quite stunning to see that just building more long-term care homes is sort of the only option that's really being explored. It's really quite short-sighted. So congratulations again for everybody.
Thank you, Aruna. Nice to see you. And I think you've raised some great points. And I think too, taking it from that systems perspective, so we look at the structural and the social determinants of health as much. And are we creating the structures, the social structures that are going to support, support sustainable living as well is one way of framing it. And you can always link it back into the health system, because without the proper social and structural intact systems that are going to sustain life, it's going to put pressure on the health system. And the health system is a high carbon user, and we're creating, so it creates more of the problem. So I think you can definitely build the argument in there for the need for housing as a approach for sustainable healthcare.
I think also, just building upon that, Aruna and Janet, the considering where OTs are positioned, not only within traditional healthcare roles and in community-based practice and hospital, but are we represented in tables to do with the housing crisis and within communities? When you're thinking about secondary dwellings and the shift towards trying to solve the housing crisis in Canada, in Ontario. So do we have a voice at those tables to also promote the role and value of occupational therapy, or the perspective that OT brings to those crises?
I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit to the ability to kind of provide guidance related to climate change and how climate change may be impacting people's ability to pursue their occupation or impacting their health. I know that's touched on in the playbook, thinking about, do you have access to cooling, or do you have backup generators if you need that? I guess just, how you have sort of seen that playing out in occupational therapy, and thinking as well about how you often have access to seeing people in their home, which is can be unique for some healthcare providers.
Yeah. So Jessica, I think there's huge opportunity. Again, I was having conversations with family physicians, and we were talking about emergency, the 72 hours be prepared. That's kind of advice coming down from the federal government, and you'll follow the emergency alerts. But, if we're working with people, if they have communication disorders or mobility limitations, like how do they even manage the alert systems, and can we, as part of a primary care team, integrate that into our circle of care, and making sure people are able to access and respond to emergency alert systems, and then what is the evacuation plan. So if you add on those mobility restrictions, you're going to have to plan and make for appropriate plan. So it's not just getting in the car and going, but what do you do with that power mobility device? What do you do with those power mobility chargers? What do you do if you are rely on a lot of smart technologies in the home, but you're going to have a 3-day power outage? All of these things, I think, as Nancy was saying, we think about the everyday lives of people and what they do in that everyday life. And so now we need to think about climate events on those everyday lives, and then how best to prepare. So when crises strike, people are ready to just continue with the daily activities they need to and want to do.
Thank you. I see Sarah has a hand up. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. And thanks for this. Has been a great presentation. I'm glad to have found a playbook and found this presentation. I also have the privilege of being able to work with people outdoors in the forest, and I've seen the connection to that in terms of sustainability and climate change. But I have to say, I hadn't really thought about the impact of keeping people out of the hospital and that impact on climate change. So that's a really good reminder. And I felt like at the start of COVID, I really saw that as one of my main roles. I work primarily with adults with mental health issues, and I felt like that's something I could really contribute during pandemic times, is just keeping people out of the hospital. But I'd say a big challenge there, working as an OT in private practice, is people have. I'm in Ottawa. A lot of people are federal government employees, so they have pretty good benefits, but they have $300 a year for OT, which doesn't go very far. So, just I guess my kind of question and comment is how we can advocate to have better coverage through ways beyond people's extended health, which many people don't have, and even those that do have it, more than $300 a year. If we're going to be offering nature-based, I'm offering nature-based therapy in groups and by one-on-one, and helping people stay out of the hospital. So,
yeah, it makes me want to pull my hair out. But we did add it into the playbook. We said, so here's the evidence if OT is going to prevent, but here's the rub. We're not guaranteed service within the Canada Health Act. We're not deemed as medically necessary. If we're covered under insurance plans, it's limited, and there's already inequity in that extended health insurance is for those that are working. It just goes on and on and on. But it's just again, we're getting back to that system transformation. Let's not just do better at what we're doing. We need to change what we do, how, and when we do it, and getting back to forefronting public health, forefronting like that primary community-based care, because it's that ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. And it just, so that's where we have to go. Shout from the mountaintop, right, Sarah? And just, and that's the work to be done, is really, and it's not just occupational therapy, but as I said, there's a wealth of health human resources within Canada. And Nancy knows this, but I had a meeting with the Royal College on Monday, and there we go, emergency response. That they need to start thinking about non-physician resources within health systems. Yeah.
Interestingly, Sarah, so I live that frustration every day, like you do, and I think CAOT has a pretty important role to play in advocating for the profession. And I am aware, I don't know the name of the committee, but I am aware that there is an interdisciplinary committee that I believe CAOT is a part of. So also with nurses and I think physicians as well, that's looking at trying to advocate for the role of not only occupational therapists, but in psychotherapy. So I certainly, there's $300 to $500 typically in extended health benefits, and there's $3,000, say, more typically in psychotherapy. So unfortunately, I've had a real challenge on the ground level with clients, with the parents of the kids that I work with, who are, going to their insurance companies and trying to put through these services under psychotherapy as well, because I'm an occupational therapist and a practicing psychotherapist, within the scope of occupational therapy practice. So unfortunately, the committee is doing the work, but it takes time, and there's probably not a lot of incentives perhaps for insurance companies to move quickly on that, right? So I did learn that if they manually do it, that it can, in the computer system, then you can move things through. But I've found that I've had to register as well, which shouldn't be, with another college in addition, with the College of Psychotherapists, in order to have two numbers to move forward, and decided that was, I was having to say no to too many people because they didn't have the benefits. So it's a very real on the ground kind of frustration in terms of some of the limitations in practice. As we talk about, moving forward and these visions for the profession, we need to be sitting at these various tables. We need to be, certainly supporting CAOT and their role in representing occupational therapists across the country in this and other similar issues.
So thank you again to our two fantastic speakers, and thank you so much to everyone for being here and for this very lively conversation. We did want to just mention as well that we do have one more session in this primary and community care series that we're running, which will be in 2 weeks on May 29th. And that's looking at social prescribing, again, and the link to sort of sustainable health systems. So we're really excited for that one. And if you're interested, you can check that out. Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.